Hello and welcome to the Crannog Cast. My name's Rich. I'm a community archaeologist here at the Scottish Crannog Centre. And today we're sat down with Ed, he's been on a past episode where he's talked about sustainability at the Crannog Centre. But Ed has been putting together a document which is specifically for the centre in his role as sustainability officer. And the whole idea is that what we wanted is the development as we move forward towards the LURB. The aim is that we want to be Scotland's most sustainable museum. Now, there's lots of aspects to this, and the reason that we're focusing on that is that actually to be Scotland's most sustainable museum, there's a huge amount of, I suppose the word is past actions that we can be inspired by today. So with the Iron Age people inspired us a way of life which was quite sustainable in terms of the archaeological record. We don't have very much of it left. And actually to take that practice and be inspired by the past, we can live in a more sustainable practice way today. So Ed has been working on this document. We're naming it the Sustainability Manifest for the Future.
Yep.
Which is a big, bold name, and I like it. But the whole idea of this document that Ed's been putting together, which I don't know 100% about, which is why we're going to do the podcast today, because I'm going to act ignorant, because I am ignorant, and find out about what some of the details are. But the premise of this, if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ed, is that it's working as we're in the start of our journey to being Scotland's most sustainable museum, and this is a roadmap that's setting us out as we start our journey so that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah, so it's part of what I've been doing is to look at things that have already been happening at the centre that have been really, really successful, and all of the plans for the sustainable build of the new museum, for example, and sort of condensing that into something into this document, the Sustainability Manifest for the Future, that will allow anybody to get a brief overview of what we do, why we do it, and the main reasons why we're doing it, and then highlight the main areas that we consider really important. Okay. So, you mentioned about talking about the people from the past. For example, coppicing is something that we've sort of really, really got into and we're pushing forward. And then the other thing would be the apprentices as well. So we'll come back to that in another.
So you've got your document in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
How many pages is it?
Not
that that's important.
Good question.
How many pages is it?
So Word is telling me 10.
10.
And it is 10 pages.
10 pages, perfect. So it's not a silly length document. I think the idea is that what we want with this is something that we could give to any member of staff here. They could understand it. They could see our practice in it, and then see how we can then take our next step in doing it.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's about it's the gateway to what we're trying to be, and it's for anybody. So this will be going on the website for visitors to see as well, so that they can get a rough idea of what we're doing, and then if there's anything more they need to know, I'm more than happy to get in touch and ask more questions about it.
And also, we're not boxing ourselves into one way of work. No. It is a living document, and by that, it will change as we change, and as we need to change to make us Scotland's most sustainable museum.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ed, if you just want to run us through it.
Yeah. So the first part is the introduction. So the main first section of this is just a quick little background of our ambition. So the centre is currently wishing to embrace sustainability, as Rich mentioned at the beginning. We want to become the most sustainable museum in Scotland. So we've got a clearly defined target. Now, one of the things that has been fantastic is we have this 4 branches sort of model. And I've been able to take the ideas of sustainability and incorporate it into this 4 branches model. Now, for anybody that isn't aware, there is in sustainability, there's 4 main areas which are often discussed. So it is economic, environmental, social, and then there's also personal. So hopefully what you will see is these sort of combine and entwine quite a lot throughout this. So the 4 main branches is we wish to be a trusted partner for organisations and individuals want to work alongside. Special place, people want to visit and support, a place of choice to work and grow, a place that belongs in and cares for its environment. So from that, we then move on into the why we want to do it. So internationally, in 2015, the Paris Climate Agreement set targets to limit global warming temperatures to 2 degrees. And as part of our ambition to be sustainable, that is something that we've taken to heart. And during the Paris Agreement, we also there were 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which again we are incorporating into everything that we do. So while a lot of places, or when people first look at the Sustainable Development Goals, they often highlight specific ones. So I'll just check because I always get the number wrong. So for example, for us, it is education would be one of the things that might stand out for a museum. Now, my argument is all of those things we should be touching upon in some way. Now, while some of them may not seem as important initially, we can still start the conversation. So, for example, clean water. Scotland is not, without water. There's quite a lot of it. We're sat by a lock right now.
It rains.
It does. Clean water for most UK citizens isn't something we ever think about. However, as a museum, we can still have that conversation. We can still say, look, we've got a borehole at the new museum. How do we get water? Well, if this is how we get water, how do people across the world get water? Why is this such a big problem for certain people?
Yeah.
So that's that sort of section. And then there's a little bit about national and local sort of goals that we will sort of be working towards as part of this.
Okay.
A lot of sort of net zero sort of things and carbon reduction. And then finally a little bit about museums, the museum sector itself. So 24% of carbon emissions come from within the cultural sector come from museums. So it's quite a large amount. So for us to show how we become net zero and then hopefully carbon positive, which I'll go on to in a bit later, we can show other museums, okay, this is how we did it.
Yeah.
Can we learn lessons and apply it to other museums?
Yeah. I suppose museums, we have the issue that, especially right now in museums with the cost of energy bills going up, what I think a lot of places maybe don't fully understand with museums especially is that museum buildings have to have a maintained temperature.
Yes.
That's for the preservation of the artefacts. You need to keep a consistent temperature to do that. So if you need to save on your electricity bill in the museum, you can't go around turning all the heating off in the museum building. Otherwise, you risk your artefacts, which are the artefacts that we tell the stories with, which we have to look after, and that's our first main. So there is, I think, especially to keep it relevant to this week, there are museums that are having to shut because they can't afford the energy bills, and that alternative ways of doing that, I think is for me, I'm just saying this off the back of hearing what you're saying, it's quite a valuable process.
Absolutely. And that is something that I am very conscious of because, like you say, the spike in energy prices has highlighted how reliant we still are on fossil fuels. And while the transition to renewable energies is moving, it might make people realise actually we can do this faster and how we can do this faster. And it's then showing people that you can do it and you can get your energy from renewable means. And that will then sort of lead into, if we think again, into the sustainable side, it'll help finances. And it just goes on and on. So
Sorry, carry on.
No, it's all right. So that's the main sort of introduction, sort of explains what, why. And then we have several main aims. And as Rich said, that these will change. It is a living document. But the first sort of 4 main targets is to engage with communities on a local and national level to promote sustainable thinking. Allow our visitors to see sustainable practices in action, something I'll come back to a little bit later as well. Ensure all staff understand the importance of sustainability for the future and are able to act upon this. and finally become carbon neutral by 2025 and carbon positive by 2030. Now, that last one is a ambitious target, and I'm not going to lie about that one, because a lot of our emissions come from sources we don't fully control. But I think it is only by having an ambitious target do we put pressure on people to make that change.
Yes.
Yes. So, and as I say, I mean, this is kind of sort of based around climate change, and it just sort of finishes in highlighting that it's time and we have the choice to change things, which is then what the next sort of section goes into is, well, how do we do that?
Yep. So just to go through, we've got 5 aims?
4 aims.
4 aims. Engage communities.
Yep.
Allow visitors to see
sustainable practice
in action.
Mm-hmm.
Educate staff.
Yep.
Was it?
About the importance of sustainability.
About the importance of sustainability. And the last one is carbon neutral by 2025, carbon positive by 2030.
Yeah.
So those are your 4 aims. Cool. Sounds all positive to me.
Yeah.
Carry on.
And like I say, some of them are ambitious, but I think it is better to aim for that now and fail, because at least we will have been pushing things in the right direction.
Absolutely.
So then the document then moves on to the main action areas of sort of the more nitty gritty of what things need to change, how things need to change. So the way that I've decided to break this down to sort of make it a little bit easier to follow is to use the 4 branches as the main titles.
Okay.
So I'll just go through the first one, and then I'll sort of highlight the main areas that I've sort of put for these.
Yep.
So the first one is trusted partner that organisations and individuals want to work alongside. Excuse me. So the 3 main areas within this branch are procurement, so how we buy things and where we buy things from.
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest things that museums and even individuals have is purchasing power.
Yeah. Who
we buy from has an impact.
Yes.
And a lot of businesses will say, we will only change until people's spending changes. If people stop buying a product, they stop making the product because they won't make any money.
Yeah.
So ensuring that we have a consistent procurement policy across the centre, that we are looking at the sustainability aspect of that.
Okay.
So the next sort of aspect is finance. So we're practicing ethical finance. So is our pensions in the right place? Are the banks in the right place? So the money is getting put in the right places?
I'm not skimming money off the top.
Yeah, well, we hope so.
I'm not, by the way.
Yeah.
Carry on.
And then finally, it's the Crannog community. So engage with the local community and share knowledge and promote sustainable thinking. So education within the community itself.
And working alongside.
Absolutely. And this is where you'll start to see now, as we sort of move into the second branch, how certain things overlap within those 4 sustainable areas, which I think personally allows for flexibility, which above all else is a hallmark of sustainable thinking, because you can't always be rigid. Things will change. Can you adapt? This will allow for that to happen.
Yeah, there is no cookie cutter approach.
Absolutely not. You have to consider it specifically for your own business, museum, person.
Yeah.
Your sustainable sort of life will be different depending on who you are for a myriad reasons. But it's how you get to the end result. If you know that you've done everything you can to get there, that's the most important part. So if you need to drive 30 miles to work, you need to drive 30 miles to work because there isn't a bus. Yeah. We'll come back to that later on.
So, second action.
Second one is a special place people want to visit and support. So the centre is extremely visitor and customer orientated. The visitors here and the visitor experience is absolutely essential. So we engage with our visitors and look for new ways of presenting our collection to highlight sustainable ideas. So not only will we start to show people how it works, but we will use the artefacts from 2,500 years ago to start the conversations, to say, hey, look, this is how they made it with this. This works. Can we make it like this?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the answer will be no. Most of the time, I think it will be yes.
Yeah.
So learning, look at ways to explain sustainable ideas, to all audiences and be proactive in our approach. So sustainability can sometimes feel a little bit aloof. It can be a bit high and comes from the UN and people are a bit...
Yeah.
I want that to sort of break those barriers down.
Yeah.
You can talk about it. Everyone can talk about it.
Yeah.
We will also go and talk to you about it.
Yeah. Humanise the process.
Absolutely. And then finally, it is travel. To promote sustainable modes of travel and work with partners to expand these options for visitors and wider community.
Yeah. Just makes sense.
Yeah. Loch Tay is obviously a beautiful place, but sometimes a bit difficult to get to by public transport.
2 hours from everywhere.
Yes. And then the third part is a place of choice to work and grow.
Yeah.
So that includes governance and leadership, so that it is embedded throughout the organisation, all the way from trustees, all the way down to volunteers. Sustainability is something that everybody knows about, everybody engages with. The staff and volunteers will make sure they have a knowledge about climate issues and take responsibility for it as well, so that everybody works together. And then finally is partnerships. So seek out partnerships allow us to expand our sustainable thinking and engage with a wider audience. So again, it allows us to have those conversations, with more people, which then progresses everything further.
Yes.
And then the final strand, a place that belongs in and cares for its environment. So the three main sort of areas: enhance biodiversity, encouraging wildlife across the site. So Delurve is a beautiful place. We want to make sure that wildlife can still be there, that we embrace that. Reduce our environmental impact. So I've mentioned about net zero and the carbon footprint, and also trying to make a zero waste site.
Zero waste site.
Excuse me. And then finally, the buildings and sites are managed with the environment in mind and materials as responsibly sourced.
Yes. Which again kind of folds back into your first one, being a trusted partner, finding the right stuff to come from. You're still sourcing things in the same sort of remit, but it all comes around.
Exactly, and that I think is the flexibility that the manifest gives. Is these are highlighting the 12 kind of areas that all work intertwine with sustainable development, with the 4 areas of sustainability, and they bounce off and connect with one another. And that, for me, is the whole point.
Yeah, when it's all connected together, you have to do one to follow the other.
Exactly. You pull on one string, everything else.
So those are the action areas. Okay, so that's how you're breaking down, basically, to achieve the aims. These are the areas where we're going to enact a change or do what we're doing to achieve that.
Yeah.
So is there any specific, in the document, do you have any specific actions that are in those areas? We don't have to go through them all because there's 12 there, as you just said, and then there's probably, is that broken down into...
And that's then broken down into individual actions itself. So again, it's, take something large, split it into smaller chunks, and you suddenly find you can manage it.
How to eat an elephant?
Yep.
One bite at a time.
Exactly. Each area is broken down into specific actions, and these actions are given to specific people, specific timeframes. And again, because this document will be accessible to anybody, people will be able to see this, and then I'll get onto monitoring later, but we will be we will be trying to do these things during the year. So one example of an action would be finances, so the practice, ethical finance. So earlier in the year, this is something that we were already able to do. We are part of the government Nest pension.
Yep.
The Nest pension scheme has an option on there for essentially a low impact choice, a choice that is environmentally and socially more considerate. So I was able to give the information to the whole of the staff, how to change if they so wished. And then this will also be highlighted for anybody else that comes in, any new staff, this will also be highlighted for them. And that is their choice, but we've given them the information so they can make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And I suppose the other one that I would probably highlight in terms of a specific action would be the building and the maintenance. So the building and maintenance side is how we have sourced so many materials so locally, and you'll know better than me how much partnership that's taken, and how important that is for our sort of our goal for the site and the build.
I think again, to bring it back to how the archaeology is inspiring our practice today, is that 2,500 years ago, the people that lived on our crannogs would have built what they could with what they had within the closest distance possible. Okay, and the archaeology of our crannog indicates a group of very skilled craftspeople over a variety of number crafts, and when we look at it with a reflective view, what we say is that these people were not thriving, they weren't surviving, they were thriving. So within what they had, primarily, not everything, which is important to note, but primarily the bread and butter of their existence was within, we say walking distance, but boating distance, or within a fairly close period of time, their food, their warmth, their building materials, their tools, everything would have come within a walking distance, is what we say. But by that, obviously, that's quite a higgledy-piggledy term. But it's within a distance which is, I would consider, not needing for us today motorized mechanical transport of any shape or form. So there's a way for us to be inspired by that, to apply to what we are doing today with the build at Delurb, to try and do that as much as we can. Now, obviously, we don't live in 500 BC. The environment has changed, the materials are different, we cannot build in the same way, but what we can do is we can take that as our guiding light, in a way, to go, we're going to go with this drive first and do the best we can, which then means we can achieve something that's possibly more sustainable. And by that, I mean is that the Iron Age village, or the setup that built the Crannog 2,500 years ago, there is no trace of it on the landscape now. So that means it's gone back to zero. It's gone back to nothing, which means it's had as minimal impact as we can have. The only thing that's left is the Crannog out there on the water, and that's because nobody else went out there to try and build the Crannog on top of it. Okay, so actually, if we can take that as our ethos and incorporate that into the build, not only does it mean there is minimal impact as best we can do, and that's not saying there is no impact, there obviously is impact, again, we're in one society, but when we talk about it, we can talk about that thought process, and that helps us better connect to the people of the past, because we're trying to not think like them, but be inspired by our methods by them in a way that can inform today. And museums need to be relevant, they need to be up to date, they need to be drivers of social change. I believe that, and I think, a lot of people in museums believe that. But right now we're in a situation where we call it the climate crisis, and I think maybe the term's been used to the point where it doesn't maybe hit home with as much power as the word should, but there is a word crisis in there. So if museums can play a role using our collective heritage to inform practice today, then I think we should be doing that. And the Delurb build, even to the point of just asking the people that are closest to us for the materials first, which is what they did 2,500 years ago. It's a way of connecting to the past. We only create the community. We can only talk about a community that's there in the past by creating a community today, and that's how we're trying to, with the Delurb build especially. That's how we're trying to enact that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you said there is it highlights how quickly one aspect of this feeds into the rest of it. So, like, just sourcing materials, how many conversations you can start having, wider conversations about modern society and where we get things from, that we can then, talk to visitors about.
Yeah. And I think the big thing with that is if we can get we did a podcast last year with Ian about how coppice works and how coppicing works. But if we can get sustainable coppice practice in place near our site, that for me is the ultimate winner, because what that does is it's I don't know many places where the buildings we have can be maintained, repaired, and rebuilt with what's across the road, which the same organisation is managing. And we have a glorious opportunity with heritage to not just have it that we're just managing it because we need a parts factory for repairing our buildings, but actually we can talk about heritage practice in the way that we're maintaining and repairing our buildings.
Yeah.
And it all folds into one, but actually the story is not just a story, it's a way of work.
Yeah.
And that kind of, that all gets embedded into how we're looking at Delurb. And that's the step between being a museum that talks about sustainability to being a museum that practices sustainability. And that, I think, is an important feature of this, with the compassing especially.
Absolutely. So yeah, the final sort of section for the document is just monitoring and reviews. So as we said at the beginning, it is a live document. This will be reviewed annually. During the year, it will be checked on to see if targets are being met, to sort of give us an idea, and then certain sort of key factors like carbon emissions, how people are getting to us in terms of transport. There'll be certain monitoring things there, which will be finalised, to sort of see if we're going in the right track.
Okay. So there's going to be a checks process.
Yeah,
which needs to happen.
Yeah, you as much as I people don't like them sometimes, the targets, they need to be there. And it is just a way of making sure that what you said you're trying to do are being backed up with certain evidence.
Wonderful.
So that is the document.
The manifest, as we call it.
The manifest. Apologies. I'm still.
No, and I think it's a good place for us to start. And from this, obviously, it will change. Not because anybody's done anything wrong at the beginning, but because it should change as we learn more. So that's not just a change in terms of what we need to do, but there might be something down the line that we want to add in because an opportunity has arisen that we want to do. So one thing, for instance, I'm pulling this out the top of my head right now as I'm looking, is that we have a massive body of water there that, again, I'm just saying this out loud, might be a source of energy down the line. There's a massive body of water there that, as a water source heat pump, there might be an advance in that technology, or it might be a cheapening in that technology, or there might be something, again, I'm just talking out loud here, that enables us to put into this document that to achieve this, we will do this. So to achieve carbon neutral by 2025, we're going to install this. To achieve carbon positive by 2030, we're going to add this in. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 8 years, so let's not box ourselves into a practice.
Exactly.
We can bring that in.
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely. Good
stuff. So, I think that's the plan. If anybody, we're hopefully in the next few weeks going to get this up somewhere, public. But if not, it will be available. I'm sure if you email through or asked us, we can send this out and chat to it. Do come in and visit us. And as part of our visit, if you ever have any questions about sustainability at the museum itself, more than happy for any of us to talk about what the plans are for the Delurb and where we want to go. There's so many people on site that have different facets of this as well and are running with it. We've got Jenny developing forest gardens, which the intention is that those forest gardens at some point will bear fruit, literally, that will actually feed and be able to provide food for our cafe as we run it. We've obviously got the compassing with Ian, the building process itself, and the sustainability of craft there too. It's all involved and it's all kind of entangled, I think is the word. You can't, instead of trying to pull them apart and do them separately, just do them as a big ball.
And that's just it. It's the whole process. You can't just say, okay, now we're sustainable. It is something that you constantly work on, and it is embedded within the organisation. And I think that's the thing. I think people are now sort of understanding that you need to think about this holistically. And I think the role of museums in general is to sort of move forward with this and push forward for change. And the centre with the move over to Delurb is just in the perfect place to show people how to come along on the journey with us.
A responsibility to do it the right way with the right sort of things. Wonderful, thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much.
That's the podcast for this week. There's no video this week. Next week we are going to be bringing back Maureen. We had to pause. It was meant to be Maureen this weekend. However, halfway through our recording this week with Maureen, one of the logboats broke free. Only a sentence you hear at the Crannog Centre. So we had to pause the recording to go and get the logboat. So we're planning on finishing off that recording this week to be coming out next week, and we'll be back to a video content form next Sunday. So that is, we've got this Sunday, which I believe to be forget the date, I think it's the 19th off the top of my head. And then next week on the 26th, we'll be back to video form content, and we'll be open now. We're open every single day, just to go through it again. We're open every single day from Wednesday to Friday, up until the 1st of April. And then from the 1st of April, we are going to be open every single day. So we'll be back open then right the way through. We're looking to be moving and opening on a new site at the Lurb in June at the latest. So we are getting all our skates on to be moving on now with the development and getting us where we need to be. If you've got any questions, or if you'd like to volunteer or get in touch with us, do just send us an email. There is an email which is info@crannog.co.uk. Do feel free to send anything to that. But also, if you want to volunteer specifically or get involved in the build and see what we're talking about in a bit of practice, you can send an email to volunteers. That's with an S, volunteers @crannog.co.uk as well. So just come and see us, even if nothing else. Come and see us for a visit, and we'll speak to you soon.